We need to have a talk about comedy, all right? Because comedy is offensive. But there's been a lot of comedians who refuse to perform on college campuses because college students are so sensitive. But this story is actually interesting, and I think it warrants a conversation. This is from BuzzFeed News. It says, students walk out after a comedian allegedly sexually harassed a student during a show at Purdue University. Comedian Andy Gross was performing a stand-up routine at Purdue University that students say involved sexually harassing an audience member. Wow. I read that and I was shocked because there's a fine line between comedy and sexual harassment. But I will say, right now, we don't know what this comedian did. Was it the comedian making an offensive joke and that people got angry about it? Because comedians do that. And comedians want to push the line, not necessarily make people upset or angry. They want people to laugh and feel good. But sometimes they don't know where that line is and they might step over it. So let's take a look at the story because I did skim through it and I think something needs to be said. We need to talk about youth. We need to talk about the young people of our generation and the weakness. Maybe I'll title this video Millennials Are Weak as Shit or something. Several students walked out of an orientation week performance by comedian Andy Gross. They said, protesting a part of the show they said was lewd and inappropriately targeted a student participant from the audience. So basically what they're saying in this story is that the comedian Andy Gross invited a volunteer up on stage and then started doing something lewd. He insisted the woman from the crowd keep inching closer, and he proceeded to do a voice-throwing technique while staring down at his midsection saying, "Let me out of here," insinuating his penis was talking to the girl. A sophomore who was in the audience told BuzzFeed. He then purposefully failed, so then it says that he told the woman to get closer, like cheek to cheek, before instructing her to put her hand on his thigh while he did a card trick. He then purposefully failed the card trick and said, "Well, at least I got a free feel-up out of it." So apparently this was, this is hilarious. Purdue Student Success Program's Dan Carpenter apologized, telling students, "I share your outrage at the way he interacted with and spoke to students during his act." Okay. Did Andy Gross sexually harass a woman? I would argue technically no, because it's a performance that someone volunteered to take part in. I can understand the inherent sexual nature of it, calling it a feel-up, saying get cheek to cheek, and, talking to your dick. So, am I upset that people walked out? Not necessarily. I think you have every right to walk out if you're angry. You can express your outrage. But I do think we have another problem in our society with millennials. I'm a high school dropout, for those of you that didn't know. I went to high school for a couple months and then never went back and never got my diploma because I don't need one, and most people don't. If you just have ambition and passion and you're willing to learn and keep working and hustling, you can be successful. There are a lot of people who make good money who are dropouts. There are, famous celebrities and professional skateboarders, a lot of professional skateboarders who dropped out. And then you have the billionaires who all dropped out of college. So I look at these young people, and what I want to point out here is that the woman who was supposedly harassed chose to do these things, right? In no way does it say that he forced her to do anything. He asked her to come up on stage as a volunteer and then said, do this, do that, do this. And the person did. I don't know if you can call that harassment if the person is agreeing to do what you're asking them to do. But this is where we're getting into dangerous territory in the Me Too era, in that there are instances where you can literally ask someone, like this guy said, "Hey, get closer, like cheek to cheek." The woman does it. He says, "Put your hand on my thigh." She does it. And then they go, "That was harassment." Well, at what point is it the responsibility of the individual to say, "I'm not going to press my cheeks against yours"? Right? It's almost like young people today will just do whatever they're told and then complain later about it. Well, how hard is it? Like, look, if someone invited me up on stage, and I don't understand there's peer pressure and stuff, but they were like, "Hey, push your butt cheeks up against mine," I'd be like, "Excuse me?" And then I would laugh and be like, "No, like I'm not gonna do that. Sorry. Hey, find a different volunteer." Where's the mental fortitude? All right, I have a theory as to why so many young people are democratic socialists today. I have a theory why students will complain about a woman voluntarily engaging in behavior and calling it harassment. And it's because these are, they're not necessarily middle or upper class, but there's a certain kind of bourgeoisie-ish behavior that's associated with these young millennial types. It's like a lack of mental fortitude, willpower, and I would say, look, as someone who is a liberal and believes in a lot of socially liberal policies and have been more aligned with the Democratic Party of more than anything, there's a reason why I am someone who is totally willing to call out the left. And it's because the left has become frail, fragile, inexperienced, and inconsistent. And I'm not saying the right doesn't hold any of those things either, but more specifically, as someone on the left, and I see this happening, I'm like, we've got to weed out this problem, these bad behaviors. Personal responsibility exists. And Republicans, have frequently talked about personal responsibility, and many Democrats talked about collective responsibility. But just because you might believe in collective responsibility doesn't mean personal responsibility doesn't exist, just to varying degrees. We have young people. They go to school. They turn 18. They go to school again. These are people who have spent literally their entire lives, they're college students, they graduate. Many of them have never held a job. Some of them have maybe worked at Starbucks. Some of them maybe worked at McDonald's, but most of them haven't. I worked with someone who got a master's degree and never had a job, right? They never had a job. And so when they were given a task, they would say, what do I do? And I would say, here's your task. Go do it. And they'd say, yeah, but how do I do it? And I'd be like, what do you mean, how do you do it? I don't want to get too specific because I don't want to call anybody out. But it'd be something like, you need to bring these papers, file this paperwork. And they would say, how do I do that? And I'd be like, what do you mean? Go through the papers, figure out where they go. And I don't know. It's not my job to do the paperwork. I don't know how it's done. And it got to a point where they actually started yelling at me like, you need to tell me what to do because I have no idea what's going on. And I had an epiphany. I was like, wow, I'm a high school dropout. I had to figure everything out on my own. And it's probably why I work for myself. And it's probably why I've, led the charge in mobile live streaming and have developed new techniques and practices. Why I was the founding member of Vice News and worked in these companies where I kind of led the charge on how to do certain things and innovate and change things, because my whole life has been about me figuring out what to do and solving my problems. And I think this comes from my family owned a business when I was younger. And when I was like 10 years old, I was traveling across Chicago by myself to go to my family's business and help with the business. And I had to solve these problems. I also played strategy games when I was younger. I learned how to play chess at a young age. So I was calculating, and there was no one there to tell me what to do. So when I started high school, I was like 14. After a couple months, I realized these people don't know what they're doing either. And they're not confidence building. And if maybe it was just the teachers I had, but because they weren't willing to inspire confidence and be good leaders, I had no faith in them. And I realized, what? I can only rely on myself. I can't blame anyone else for my problems. If something bad happens, yes, to an extent, it's not necessarily my fault, but I can always learn to do better to avoid these problems. If someone attacks me while I'm going to an ATM machine, is it my fault I was attacked? No. But can I improve my personal security to avoid getting attacked? Yes. So I'm not going to walk down an alley late at night, and I'm not going to use an ATM in a bad neighborhood at 2 a.m. I'm going to try to mitigate the possibilities and take some responsibility while recognizing the criminal is the problem. The criminal is who is at fault for the crime. And that's why I don't like the idea of victim blaming, so much so as victim preparing. You've made a mistake. Somebody attacked you. What can you do next time to prepare yourself? And so I got older and I started thinking, I'm going to solve this problem on my own. And that's how companies have to function. When these kids graduate college, they don't have that. They don't have that ability to just solve problems. Some people do. But think about this. Kids who go to college, they take out loans because they're told to, so they just do it. Now they can't pay their loans back, and they have salary requirements to pay back loans that are going to saddle them down for decades. Then they start a job, and they say, okay, tell me what to do. And they have to be trained to do it because they can't just figure it out. So what happens when these people who are in college, in school their whole lives, where a government institution, a public or private, depending on some colleges, will tell them what they have to do, when they can do it, where they have to go, everything in their life is dictated. They're going to get out and say, why isn't the government telling me what to do? And so then they're going to advocate for the government to tell them what to do. And then you're going to have individualists, people who solve their own problems. Maybe you grew up on a farm. And there is no one to be like, here's how you can solve this. Maybe you have your dad, your siblings who can help you and give you tips. But someday you're going to walk out in the middle of nowhere and you're going to say, I got to solve this problem. In fact, maybe you're from the inner city. You're from a bad neighborhood. and you don't have wealthy institutions and this kind of public infrastructure to take care of you. So we end up with this like college educated class. And this is reflected in, there was some like Atlantic article that talked about this, and I didn't read too much about it, but it talks about how the anti-white rhetoric is mostly upper class whites versus lower class whites, because the upper class whites are virtue signaling to their peers about how woke they are, and lower class whites don't like the idea of being ragged on for being white. You know, ultimately, I think what it comes down to is, when we look at a story like this is an individual who was asked to come on stage voluntarily. The guy did things that are arguably inappropriate, but the volunteer went along with all of it. At some point, you've got to be like, I'm not going to do that. But I think what we're seeing here is as an example of two different things. One, the willingness of these young millennial types to just do whatever they're told, even if they don't like it. And two, anger over the fact that someone engaged in a behavior voluntarily and later got mad about it, right? I don't know what the solution is, but I can say, if you put kids in an institutionalized learning facility where they're told what to do their entire lives and they never solve a problem on their own, they're probably going to be socialists because they want Big Brother to tell them what to do. And, you know, for whatever it is, I think that's one of the biggest problems we're facing with the millennial generation. Adults, the boomers, the parents of millennials have just said, go to college, go to college, go to college. For me, I said, why? I'm not going to do that. I don't think I need it. I'm going to solve things on my own. But a lot of kids just said, okay, whatever you say. And now they're saddled with debt. And now they can't do what they want to do because they have to get an office job. But not only that, they're just going to do whatever they're told. And if it makes them angry, they'll complain later instead of taking responsibility at the time of the incident. And this goes beyond just stories like this. It leads people, in my opinion, to voting for socialism because they want the government to dictate their lives for them because it's easier. But it's a lot worse for people who advocate for liberty. And I think that's why, you know, maybe that's one of the big divides for me, why I believe so much in liberty, but I am a liberal, is because I see the system. I believe that certain things need to be a certain way, so I have my politics. But I also feel like we need to solve our problems by thinking them out and taking responsibility for the problems we face. So I guess it is what it is. Yeah. I don't know, man. Should this comedian have done that? Yeah, maybe it was inappropriate, but are we going to blame the comedian because the other student volunteered to do it or get mad on their behalf? It's ridiculous. Anyway, I got one more video coming up. Stick around in just a few minutes.